Part 137. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yuzu. Chapter 1363. Some people will go to extremes after they develop because of childhood sufferings, and they are unwilling to recall everything that they have been humble, but some people will keep reminding themselves to remember those sufferings, and try to make more people avoid those suffering. Bowen undoubtedly belongs to the second category. He is smart but not proud. He always knows what he wants, so he can move forward step by step towards the goal in a down-to-earth manner. Since he was 3 years old, he knew that the family had such a difficult life because of him and his mother. Seeing his young sister carrying a bow and arrow and following her father to hunt in the mountains on a snowy night, the young Bowen learned to be sad. There is only the Mew family in Linchin village. Even if the villagers are kind, the little Bowen can always hear something about his family. Those grown-ups thought he was young and ignorant, so they didn't shy away from him, so he knew that hunting was very dangerous. It was a life-threatening industry, not only not as stable as farming, but also not as safe as farming. He also knew that their family could have had a better life, but because he and his mother had to take medicine all year round, no matter how hard their father and sister tried, the family could not save money. At that time, the young Bowen didn't understand why his father and sister didn't farm. Isn't farming stable and safe? Although he was puzzled at the time, he didn't take it too seriously, because in the child's heart, the danger of losing his life was the same as going on a long trip, and there was no specific concept. Until he was 5 years old and experienced the war. Only then did he understand what death is. The former friends disappeared and never came back, the former uncles and aunts disappeared after death, and no one even mentioned them anymore, as if they never existed. And their families were devastated by the loss of them, especially the orphaned children, who might not even survive that winter because they had no longer a shield to shield them from, and they had to make it on their own. At that time, Bowen was terrified. He thought, what would happen to him if his father and sister were gone one day? Will he be curled up at the foot of the wall like those children, and can only stare at the passing people with a pair of big eyes, hoping that someone will show kindness and give him a bite to eat? Because of such fear, Bowen was particularly clingy to his sister for a while, and he was not sad when he knew that their family was going to join the military, and even a little happy. Because their family has land. If there is land, we can grow food, and my father and sister will no longer have to go to the mountains to hunt every day, so they will not be so dangerous. The naive Bowen thought that their family could stay together forever, but then he realized that things were far from that simple. For example, my father and sister can't even tell the crops apart, let alone farming, which is also risky. If it is said that hunting depends on the mountains for food, then that kind of land depends on the sky for food. Their luck was not very good. They encountered drought in the first year. He watched his sister go to grab water for irrigation every day. Although she was only 10 years old, she would lie on the bed and beat her back secretly every night. He remembered all of these in his heart, filling up his little heart. Bowen has never been a strong person, he prefers to set off others, such as his own sister. My sister's wish is to cultivate good seeds to increase the yield of food, but good seeds are not enough to grow food. Technology, the right time and the right place are indispensable. My sister has already paid great attention to improving planting techniques when cultivating improved seeds, but the weather and geographical conditions cannot be controlled. In addition to improved seeds and technology, farmers have to rely on God to a large extent if they want to have a good harvest. That's why Bowen wants to build water conservancy projects to store water in floods and release water in droughts. He hopes that one day, even if the weather is not good, the people of the world can use the water conservancy projects to have a good harvest. Instead of looking at the sky with tearless eyes and begging in sorrow. And he does have the talent. Many people think that it is very hard to survey the terrain on the spot, but Bowen feels very happy, and he enjoys the process of exploration. In thousands of mountains and rivers, he found the most suitable place for construction of water conservancy projects, and designed the most suitable water conservancy projects for that piece of land. In the following decades or even hundreds of years, this water conservancy project will continue to serve the people on this land. It provides convenience for people, allows them to have a good harvest of food, and protects them from drought and flood. What could be more pleasing in the world than this? For Mu Bowen there is no more. But obviously not many people can understand him. His parents, wife, children, and friends all feel that he is very bitter. Every time he takes his things to go out, everyone looks at him with distressed eyes. Mu Bowen knew that they did this because they loved him, but he didn't need to be distressed or pity. What he wanted more was encouragement and praise. Just like his sister, every time he packs up his things and goes to the palace to say goodbye, his sister will be very happy to congratulate him. Are you going to inspect the water conservancy again? That's really great. You have to watch carefully. After all, water conservancy is related to the livelihood of local people for hundreds of years. His sister would happily tell him that this would be the first water conservancy project he built, and said seriously, "Bowen, you will definitely be the person who designed the most water conservancy projects in the past and present, and future generations will be proud of you." Mu Bowen said with a smile, "But they will definitely be proud of you first, and then me." The name of Princess Rong has been spread to every place in Daki along with Fengshao grain shop, and has even spread overseas. As far as Mu Bowen knows, there are historians in the court who want to focus on recording sister's affairs. It can be said that, his sister is already famous in Danking. Mu Yangling laughed loudly when he heard the words, and patted him on the shoulder and said, "Then we sisters and brothers must work together to grab all the demeanor of our time." Mu Bowen smiled and nodded. The two siblings took it as a joke. But when later generations study this period of history, these two people are indeed the two most dazzling stars. At this time, Mu Bowen didn't know the high praise of future generations. He was worrying about relief housing and heating facilities. He was also familiar with the construction industry, but he was most proficient in water conservancy construction. Mu Bowen was a little confused. Seeing that it was already dawn outside and the sky was dark and heavy, as if it was going to rain at any time, he couldn't help but paced out. When the wife saw her, she quickly asked, "Where is the uncle going?" Mu Bowen answered absently, and continued to walk outside. Seeing this, his wife sighed slightly, knowing that he had listened but didn't care. She couldn't help but tugged on his sleeve and said, "Mother sent us a letter asking us to go back for the new year. Father is going to celebrate his birthday this year. Isn't uncle planning to go back?" Mu Bowen was stunned for a while before saying, "I'm going to see my sister." The wife twitched the corners of her mouth, watching her husband walk away, who answered the wrong question. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1364. A few days after Mu Yangling and Qi Heiran came back from Nanyang, when they heard her younger brother coming, she asked someone to take out the gifts she brought back for him to choose. But Mu Bowen was dumbfounded, and when he entered the room, his eyes were always looking down at his toes. The corner of Mu Yangling's mouth twitched twice, and he went forward and led his younger brother to the study room, arranged him to sit on a chair covered with animal skins, and asked someone to light up the brazier. Seeing him bow his head in thought, he shook his head and left. My younger brother is like this when he thinks about a problem. Sometimes he is abducted in a daze and does not respond. Once he was walking on the street, because he suddenly thought of a problem in water conservancy, he subconsciously walked all the way home. But when he got to the door of his house, he wandered all the way to the palace, and then walked slowly from the palace to the Ministry of Industry. When he came to his senses, he had already been taken home by the servant. Because of this, Mu Yangling felt very sorry for his sister-in-law, and she would help her brother's house as long as she could. The younger brother is obsessed with water conservancy projects, and Mu Bowen almost depends on his sister-in-law for everything inside and outside the family. Mu Bowen is not only her younger brother, but also brought up by her, so he can't help feeling guilty about it. Fortunately, my younger brother is not someone who forgets his family just because of his work. He will also deliberately spare time to accompany his wife and children and educate them. Sometimes I will pull my wife out to live a two-person world alone in a very romantic way. In Fang's heart, her husband is not inferior to other men except that she has not earned her a life, and she is even happier than most people in the world. When Mu Bowen came back to his senses, it was already dark outside. He walked to the flower hall and saw that his wife, Fang Shi, was sitting with his sister to choose the brilliant gemstones on the couch. Seeing his younger brother, Mu Yangling quickly waved and said, "Come and see what color gems your wife wears." Mu Bowen stepped forward to see that there were 40 or 50 large gemstones on the couch, and asked, "Where do you get so many gemstones? Any one of them is worth 100 taels if taken out, and a few big ones may be worth 1,000 silver. When your brother-in-law and I were traveling in Nanyang, we encountered a lost Western merchant ship. We brought them back to the route. This is their thank you gift. How about it, isn't it beautiful?" Mu Bowen raised his eyebrows. "Foreigners are so generous. Hutu sent a military ship to pick us up. They know our identities." Mu Yangling pushed the gems in front of him and said, "Hurry up and choose a few for your wife, she has been hesitating for a long time." Mu Bowen immediately chose the 2 largest rubies and sapphires, and chose a few smaller rubies, and said to his wife with a smile, "These small ones will be made into earrings for you, and they will be made into a pair with this big one. Come on, you look good in red." Fang's face turned red, and she whispered, "There are too many, my sister hasn't chosen yet." Mu Yangling hurriedly waved his hands and said, "I have a lot of gems, so you don't need to keep them." Mu Bowen also nodded, "The most important thing for my sister is gemstones. She loves jade even more. I will give her my new jade grape pendant later." Mu Yangling smiled, "Thank you for remembering me. Not only do I miss my sister, but I also miss my father and mother." Mu Bowen groped for the gem in his hand and said, "Sister, I want to go back to the Northland. My mother wrote to say that my father will have a big birthday this year." "Then what?" Mu Bowen coughed lightly, and said with a little guilt, "But I promised Lian to help them design a suitable heating and relief house as soon as possible, so that even if I go back to the Northland, I'm afraid I won't be able to stay with my parents. Passing through the house 3 times without entering, it may be admirable to read in books, but it is uncomfortable when you experience it yourself." At least Mu Bowen was worried that his parents would be angry if they found out. If they would be angry if they went back to the north, it would be better not to go back. Mu Yangling patted him on the head and said, "You think father and mother are so unreasonable, you just write to tell them the truth. Don't worry, they will definitely support you, even if they are angry." Mu Bowen lowered his head and said nothing. Mu Yangling sighed slightly, and asked her sister-in-law to help put the gems into a box. She took him to the study and watched him write the letter in person. Mu Bowen doesn't have much contact with his parents. Although there are letters every month, but unlike his elder sister, Mu Bowen almost only greets his parents on a daily basis, let alone talking about business affairs like Chi Heiran and his sons. Mu Bowen never took the initiative to mention his work with his parents, and Mu Shi and Shu Wanyang rarely asked. Mu Yangling didn't know when the estrangement between them was caused, but he understood that it was not the fault of either of them. Mu Shi had little involvement in Bowen's growth, so Bowen didn't develop the habit of telling his father since he was a child. But this cannot be blamed on Mu Shi, because it was caused by the whole era. He has tried his best to squeeze out time to spend with his family. Even Mu Yangling, when she was a girl, she seldom discussed her affairs with her father. When she needs to confide and choose, she will choose Chi Heiran. Even Fan Zijian and Ziyuheng, she has never thought about finding her father. and Shu Wanyang is a weak person, and she has done her best to protect her children. She makes clothes, food, washes, and does all the housework for them, and she always teaches the children to be a good person. Good man, be a promising man. If her original character decides that she can only do one, but for the sake of her children, she can only do three, not only Mu Yangling, but also Mu Bowen has seen the mother's hard work, and the two of them can only feel distressed and pity, they will not blame the mother. But this also caused the siblings to never let things outside bother her, let alone take the initiative to talk about what annoyed her. When Mu Bowen resigned from office and began to concentrate on water conservancy, although the two parties expressed that they understood each other and had no conflicts, the long absence of meetings still made the two parties feel more distanced and even unfamiliar. This made Mu Bowen both guilty and sad, and he dared not tell his parents that he might have to go through the house 3 times without entering. Standing beside him, Mu Yangling saw that he hadn't written for a long time, so he stroked his head and said softly, "Bowen, you are also a father now. I think no matter what Feng does in the future, if you don't go home for a long time, in your heart, he is still your son and your blood, isn't he?" It's natural. Mu Bowen was stunned, stared at the paper for a long time, and finally wrote slowly. What my sister said was right, no matter what Feng did, he was still his son, even if he was annoyed, their blood was still connected. In the same way, no matter what he does, he is also his father's son, and his blood is connected together. Mu Bowen wrote a letter to apologize to his parents. He first said that he would go back to celebrate his father's birthday and Chinese New Year, and then he wrote that he might have to go to other places for work reasons and could not go home immediately. Please forgive me. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1365. Mu Shi has retired and moved back to Xingzhou Prefecture from Taiyuan with his wife. Mu Bosi is still in the army and not by their side. Now the two of them have only their eldest grandson Mu Feng by their side. And the time Mu Feng can accompany them is also limited, because he is coming back to prepare for the exam, preparing for the provincial exam next year, which shows how much the couple want to see their children. So when he received his son's letter, Mu Shi's first feeling was that he was unhappy. But after being unhappy, I understood it, and let it go with a slight sigh. As he gets older, Mu Shi's heart becomes softer, and he likes to recall the children's childhood more and more. He naturally knows that the relationship between him and Bo Wen is not like an ordinary father and son. From the age of 5 to 15, he didn't even see him for a month a year, let alone teach him that it's normal for father and son to have a strange relationship. Except for Bosi and Kijia, he has not fulfilled his father's responsibility to Yangling and Bowen, not to mention work matters. Mu Shi sighed slightly. If it were him 10 years ago, if there was a war at the border, he would choose to put aside his family affairs and deal with state affairs, so it is no wonder that he blogged. Shu Wanyang brought tea and was about to persuade her husband, but when she saw him, she felt offended, and couldn't help smiling. I thought you were going to complain about him at home for a few more days. Mu Shi curled his lips and said, am I such an unreasonable person? Shu Wanyang smiled without saying a word, and said, A Ling wrote to me, saying that this time she will come back with her son-in-law, and she will come back specially to celebrate your birthday. Mu Shi's face was full of worry immediately. A Ling is too fun, even when she is old, she still runs around all over the world, and her son-in-law also messes around with her, and she is not afraid that her daughter-in-law will complain about her in the future. After marrying a daughter-in-law and entering the house, as a mother-in-law, she needs to teach for a period of time, and she needs to help with many things, but A Ling has let go of the children since they got married. No matter whether they are doing well or not, she don't ask any questions. Even Mushi's own father couldn't bear to look at them, and said, "If I didn't know that those children were born by Aling, I really thought they were all picked up on the street by her, and I don't feel sorry for the children. Maybe the children are happy that they don't care about anything. Besides, I think Aling is right. The children have their own way to go, and they also have their own life to live. Now that the children have grown up, they should let them go. They deal with the difficulties they face and the glory they get, and they have their own lives to live." Mushi hesitated, looked at his wife with a glowing face, and asked cautiously, "Wan Niang, do you want to play in different places like Aling?" Shu Wanyang shook her head and said with a smile, "It's too tiring to go out. I just like to stay at home, just go to the farm from time to time to take a look at the scenery." Mushi heaved a sigh of relief. They were old bones. He was really afraid that his wife would also have this strange hobby. Mu Yangling and Chi Heiran took a dozen guards to Xingzhou Mansion slowly. Because the road was blocked by heavy snow, the road was not easy to walk, but they walked slowly. They walked for 2 days and rested for 1 day, and then enjoyed the snow scenery and inspected the local area. Officials' relief efforts, etc., a hard journey just let them out of the taste of complacency. However, Mu Bowen, officials from the Ministry of Industry and the Ministry of Households rushed to the Northland to preside over the construction of relief houses. He had already figured out how to better use resources for heating, and designed several plans with other craftsmen from the Ministry of Industry. Sample heating facilities. However, the situation is different in different places, and some things have to be slightly modified. Mu Bowen had stayed in Xingzhou Mansion, Hanshong Mansion, and Jingzhou Mansion, so the design drawings for their situation had been sent, but for other places, he and the officials of the Ministry of Industry had to conduct on-the-spot investigations. At the same time, the Ministry of Industry also sent other officials and craftsmen to respond to the snow disaster. It was only the end of October at this time, and their reaction speed was considered fast. The local officials knew that the court attached great importance to this, and they did not dare to neglect. They arranged for the victims one after another, and few people died of freezing. The house designed by Mu Bowen is still a group house. At this time, it is difficult to build a house. If there are wealthy households who are willing to sell the house, the court will buy it with money, and then open the wall inside, and build a large kong along one side of the wall. 2 mechanisms were made, one to let the smoke out of the house, and the other to fill the air along the wall. The kong is still boiling water, so that everyone can have hot water at any time and save costs, and the heated hot water will flow around the copper pipes in the house to increase the temperature in the house. Then it flows into the shed they designed behind the house. That is a greenhouse designed to grow vegetables. There are quite a few greenhouses like this in Baidi now, because there are only frozen cabbage in winter in the north. Since his sister publicized the method of growing greenhouses, many people like to build greenhouses in winter. In order to make money. It can be said that Mu Bowen is now trying his best to use these consumed resources. As a water conservancy expert, he knew the disadvantages of destroying nature, so he said to the local officials who followed him, "After the beginning of spring, the people must be organized to plant trees on the mountain, and we must replenish as much as we cut, otherwise one day we will have nothing to cut. Children and grandchildren will leave behind devastation." He sighed. "Besides, we are encroaching on the living space of all animals in the mountains and forests. I am worried that if this cold current continues, all animals will become enemies of humans." The magistrate who came to receive the reception immediately said to several county magistrates, "Write this matter down, take out a few greenhouses and start cultivating saplings now, and let people go up to the mountains to plant trees after the spring. Next year, the time for closing the mountains to cultivate forests will be increased by 10 days, so that the mountains and forests can recuperate." Several county magistrates responded quickly, and the magistrate looked at Mu Bowen eagerly, and asked, "Mr. Mu, when can we start construction?" There are still many people who are placed in the back of the government office, but the warmth there, the facilities are not good, the space is limited, and the weather is getting colder and colder, so I don't know if they can take it. Yes, yes, there are 78 people behind our county office. Although there are winter clothes sent by the court and quilts donated by several great benevolent people, it is still cold to the bone when sleeping at night. I am really afraid. If you wake up one day and open the door, you won't be able to wake anyone up. Mew Bowen looked at the officials from the Ministry of Industry and the Ministry of Household Affairs. The official of the Household Department said with a straight face, "The money needed for the construction has been allocated, we can go directly to the bank to get it." The official of the Ministry of Industry immediately said, "We can purchase the required materials immediately, and we can start work tomorrow." As soon as this remark came out, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Mew Bowen wore a thick padded coat to go to the field to command, and sometimes he had to run around the counties to deal with various emergencies. Seeing this, the magistrate couldn't help reminding him to pay attention to rest and safety, and said carefully, "Mr. Mew, it's not far from St. Joe Mansion, only 7 or 8 days away, and it is said that General Mew will have his birthday in 10 days, why don't you take time to go back and have a look?" Mew Bowen was taken aback, and asked, "What date is it today?" The magistrate knew at a glance that he had forgotten the time, and hurriedly said, "Today is 27. The Reborn wife is farming." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1366. Mew Bowen hurried to St. Joe Mansion. "Dad, he was really busy and forgot the time, didn't he? Deliberately didn't go back to attend your birthday. It is only 7 or 8 days away from St. Joe Prefecture, but now the weather is bad, and no one knows how long it will take to get home." On the 5th day of their journey, they saw that they were getting closer and closer to St. Joe Mansion, and there was a sound of cracking horseshoes behind them. Mew Bowen didn't even need to turn around to know that this was a team of good horses, so he hurriedly stepped aside to let them pass first. 6 fine horses galloped past him. Before Mew Bowen could see each other clearly, the leader suddenly reined in the horses and turned to look back. The guards sensed the vigor of the 6 men, and put their hands lightly on the hilt of their swords. Just as they were about to mount their horses to protect Mew Bowen screamed, "Bosi! Brother!" Mew Bosi tore off the cloth on his face, and when he saw his brother, he laughed happily. "It's really a brother. I looked at your back from a distance and felt familiar. If I didn't see your eyes just now, I dare not admit it." On the way in winter, they all covered their heads and faces, only showing a pair of eyes. Otherwise, if their heads and faces were blown by the wind, even if they were not sick, their faces would be chapped and disfigured. The brothers were reunited, and they were both very happy, and they slept together at night. Seeing that the eldest brother carefully burned the ground before laying dead branches and building a tent, he was slightly taken aback, and said with a smile, "Brother, you are too careful, why is it so troublesome just to sleep in the open?" Mew Bowen smiled and said, "This is what my sister taught me when I was a child. Naturally, I should be more careful in such a cold day." Mew Bowen's entourage also brought him a roll of good things wrapped in oiled paper. Mew Bosi opened it curiously and found that it was a complete tiger skin. He was quite speechless watching his elder brother spread the tiger skin on the hay, stretched out his hand and squeezed his thin arm, and said clearly, "No wonder elder brother rarely gets sick when he travels to and fro. You are so careful on the road. It doesn't take much time, and it's not like you need to fight for time to fight or something. I won't let myself be wronged when I don't lose myself." Mew Bowen sat cross-legged on the tiger skin, and asked his younger brother to sit down too. A fire was set up at the mouth of the tent in the leeward wind, and they will rely on this fire to keep warm tonight. He used to be able to sleep in the tiger's skin when he was alone, but now with a younger brother, it is just enough to pave the floor. You must not get sick on the road, otherwise it will be very difficult to heal even with a miracle doctor. You should be more careful in the future, you know. Muabasi nodded dispensably, and asked, "Didn't you come back early? Why are you still here at this time?" "I want to build a relief house, and I forget the time when I get busy." Muboan was still a little ashamed when he mentioned it, and said, "If the two of us can't make it back in time, I don't know if my father will be angry. I hope my sister can persuade me." "Father?" Mubosi stared, and asked, "Did the elder sister go back to her mother's house?" Muboan nodded. "She set off on the same day as me, so she should have returned by now." Mubosi was happy. "It's all right now." Kajia also said that he would come back, and the four of us, brothers and sisters, got together again. "Even if we really went back late, my father would be happy to see us all here." Muabasi went to talk to his elder brother again. "Brother, please let your father go home this time, and don't make him angry again." Muboan patted his younger brother on the head. "When did you see that I deliberately made my father angry? It was just a coincidence. It happened to be the opposite. But you are right, my father is getting old, I really want to let him some." Mubosi was even happier when he heard that, and took out the wine to drink with him. Muboan shook his head. "I don't drink, I won't be able to sleep at night." Seeing his younger brother looking up, he took a sip of the burning knife, and moved inside to sleep, persuading him, "You should also drink less, drinking alcohol will hurt your liver. I'm used to the bitter cold in the north." "Don't worry, brother." Seeing his brother sleeping inside, Mubosi hurriedly dragged him out, and said with a smile, "Let my brother sleep inside. You are cold, so you should guard this place, it's the fire." Muboan didn't refuse, and moved out directly. Muabasi took a sip of his wine and asked, "Sister-in-law and nephews and nieces aren't coming back this time?" "The road is bad and I didn't let them come back." Muabasi nodded. "I didn't let them come back either, the weather is too cold, I almost couldn't bear it as an old man." Muboan looked at the silver and white between the sky and the earth, and there was endless worry in his eyes. He experienced the snow in September when he was 5 years old, and it was also very cold that year, and it was because of this that Dajin was detained. And this year's cooling is even worse than that year's. According to his diary analysis, the past 3 years have been getting colder every year. If this pattern continues next year, how cold will it be? How many years? At this time, Mu Yangling and his group had just arrived in Xingzhou Mansion. Because the city gate was closed, they simply stayed in a nearby village and waited until tomorrow to enter the city. Mu Yangling wrapped his scarf around his neck, and when he saw that it was snowing profusely again, he immediately let out a breath of hot air and said, "Bowen has been recording the daily weather conditions since he was 12 years old. According to him, the past 3 years have been one it's getting colder every year, and it's a regular pattern, which is completely different from previous years. Heiran, do you think this is a little ice age? I also think that there have been more natural and man-made disasters in recent years." Chi Heiran asked, "What is little ice age?" Mu Yangling thought for a while and said, "It's probably due to the abnormal weather like now. There is a severe drought or flood in summer, and the temperature in winter continues to drop, much lower than usual, and this phenomenon may last for many years." In modern times, some people attributed the demise of the Ming dynasty to the fact that it encountered the Little Ice Age. Although Mu Yangling felt that the Little Ice Age might have had some influence, the real reason was the Ming dynasty's own rule. The Little Ice Age began in the early Ming dynasty and ended in the middle of the Qing dynasty. This time, Daki's encounter was so similar to that of the Ming dynasty. She couldn't help but sighed, and holding Chi Heiran's hand, said, "The demise of a country is never caused by a natural disaster, but because of its decay, changes within the ruling. Heiran, you have to set up a family discipline for a few children, but don't allow them to lose the country because of fighting for power and profit in the future." Chi Heiran twitched the corners of his mouth, feeling that his wife had become inexplicably sentimental again. He waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, Da Chi, will surely last forever. Even if he can't last forever, he will die, so he can just be Da Chi forever. Anyway, after death, people don't know anything. The reborn wife is farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1367. The two brothers hurried to Xingzhou Mansion, and finally arrived outside the city gate the night before Mushi's birthday. Thinking that they would be able to go to the city to celebrate their father's birthday the next day, the two brothers were not in a hurry, so they spent the night outside the city. Mu Bowen felt relieved. When he woke up the next day, he felt dry, itchy throat and stuffy nose. Fortunately, he was conscious and not dizzy, so he went to the city with his brother after drinking a bowl of ginger soup. The city gate has just been opened, and the sky is not yet dawn. In the city, only the sound of chickens and dogs is heard. There is only thick snow on the ground, and there is a creaking sound of horses' hooves. It is rare for the brothers to calm down and let the horse run forward in small steps. Even the cold night adds a third of tenderness. Mu Bowen was calm in his heart, turned his head and smiled at his younger brother. Xingzhou Prefecture is stable and peaceful, it will be great when we can go home and settle down. Mu Bosi responded softly, and said, when I retire, I will definitely come back. The two brothers rushed back to the Mu mansion. The guard knocked on the door, the gate opened and saw the two masters coming back. They yelled in surprise, they welcomed them in and called them in to report. The winter night was cold, and the servants of the Mu residence had just woken up, let alone the master. But Mu Shi slept lightly, and he woke up whenever there was any movement outside. When he heard that his two sons had come back to celebrate his birthday, Mu Shi was still in a daze and couldn't believe it. He shook his head and laughed after a while, these two brats. The family was reunited when the morning sun broke. Like a little girl, Mukijia stretched out her hand to hold her twin brother, and said with a smile, that's all right, the four of us, brothers and sisters, are together again. Muabasi tore off his younger sister's hand, and said seriously, be honest, you're still teasing when you're too old. But Mu Yangling waved to them and said, hurry up and pay respects to father. The two brothers hurried forward and knelt down. Mu Shi hurriedly stretched out his hand to pull them. Muabasi pushed his father's hand away with a smile, and insisted on kneeling. Father, this is your first birthday celebration, sons have to give it to you no matter what, you just need to kowtow. Mu Bowen looked at his father, who was close at hand, and saw that his temples were completely white, and the hand holding him was slightly trembling with bruises. For a moment, his heart seemed to be grabbed and twisted severely. Mu Bowen let go of his father's hand, and slowly kowtowed to him 3 times. His memory is more of his father's back, carrying a bow and arrow, and pulling his sister into the mountains, back view. Every time he stood at the door of the house or leaned over the window to look out, watching him leave. His elder sister is his reliance. As long as his elder sister is by his side, he will be fearless, but his father is the pillar of the whole family, and he can rely on his elder sister with confidence. Isn't it because the whole family is carried on his back by his father? But now his father is old, he is old, and the person who used to be able to throw him into the sky with a flick is trembling when holding his hand. Seeing his elder brother lying on the ground and unable to get up, Muabasi quickly helped him when he got up, and covered it up for him. The elder brother has been traveling with me overnight, and he slept outside the city last night, and his throat is sore this morning. It's a little uncomfortable. Xu Wanyang became worried. Have you taken any medicine? Do you want to see a doctor? Mu Bowen suppressed the emotions in his heart, raised his head and smiled at his mother. I've already drank the ginger soup, and I'm probably all over the sweat. Mu Shi frowned, and muttered, you are so old that you can't even take care of yourself, so what if you come back 2 days late? Xu Wanyang cast a reproachful glance at her husband, stepped forward and pulled Mu Bowen back and said, your father loves you too. When you were away, your father talked about it every day. but this time he couldn't help but want to teach you a lesson. Mu Bowen just smiled and scanned around, but didn't see the eldest son, so he followed his mother inside and asked, "Where's Feng-er? I was picked up by your brother-in-law to practice boxing. That kid is just like you. He wants to wear a quilt when winter comes. Your brother-in-law can't stand it and says he wants to teach him a set of boxing skills. After he has practiced, he dare not say that he can wear it in winter unlined clothes, at least not like a cicada chrysalis like now." Shu Wanyang looked at the four children and said with a smile, "You four brothers and sisters, you and your sister are the ones who are most afraid of the cold, but now you and Aling they don't wear much, which shows that the prince's boxing skills are effective." Mu Yangling immediately refuted the rumors and said, "Mother, I haven't practiced his boxing skills. I'm not so afraid of the cold now because I have strong internal strength." Chi Heiran, who brought Mu Feng over, just heard this sentence. He couldn't help curling his lips, and didn't show his wife's face in front of everyone, but when he turned around and there were only two people, he asked her with a mocking smile, "Oh, what's wrong with you, sir? I don't know when you developed a solid internal force. Come and tell me, your current internal force is enough for you to jump far with light work." Mu Yangling couldn't help but blushed. Chi Heiran was even more excited, and condescendingly said to her, "Let me count how many years you have practiced internal strength. It has been more than 30 years since you were 9 years old. Even a fool can become a first-class master in martial arts, right? The inner strength method that the master gave you is the top-level exercise method collected by the Zhu family. What about you? Tisk tisk tisk." The word tisk has rich meanings, and Mu Yangling decided that she hated this word the most in her life. After despising his wife, Chi Heiran went to serve his father-in-law refreshed. It's the first time the old man celebrates his birthday, so his son-in-law has to show filial piety to him no matter what. Mu Bowen was accompanying Shu Wanyang. Seeing that his mother had a lot of gray hair on her temples, he couldn't help asking, "Mother, are you and father healthy?" Shu Wanyang smiled and nodded, "Okay, let's not talk about your father. He is as strong as a cow, and now he is still working in the fields, so he can't be free at all. My health is fine, so don't worry about it." Mu Bowen nodded, turned around and brought his son over and asked, "When do your grandparents get up every day? When do you eat breakfast? How much can you eat in a day? Does your grandfather drink alcohol? You can see that they have been sick and sick since you stayed with them for half a year. What disease did you suffer from, and what medicine did you take?" Mu Feng stared at his father dumbfounded. Before he stumbled for a long time to answer, he really didn't pay attention to this. He was going home to prepare for the exam. Mu Feng felt a little ashamed when he thought that his grandfather and grandmother would bother about his diet, clothing, and studies every day. His face was red and hot, and he whispered, "Father, it's all bad for children. I will definitely pay attention next time." Mu Bowen waved his hand. "As a son, I don't even know, so how could I embarrass you? You go and invite the housekeeper and the doctor who gave your grandparents a pulse." Mu Feng trotted out hurriedly. After all, Mu Shi is a general who retired from the battlefield, and he has a lot of hidden wounds on his body, so no matter how strong his body is, he will always have problems when he gets old, but he eats a lot and his appetite has never been bad. And Shu Wanyang has taken good care of herself these years. Although her body is weak, she still suffers from minor illnesses from time to time. On the contrary, she doesn't have as many problems as Mu Shi. When Mu Bowen was waiting for detailed questioning, the guests who came to congratulate Mu Shi on his birthday disappeared, so he hurriedly dismissed them and went to the front to entertain the guests with his younger brother. Chi Heiran's status was very high, and he couldn't meet the guests at the gate, so he stood by the old man's side to help. Mu Shi was glowing all over, with a smile on his face. After receiving the guests, he first introduced his son-in-law, and then proudly showed off his two sons. Both daughters came back to celebrate his birthday. Mu Bowen couldn't help but pause as he walked towards the front yard. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1368. Mu Yangling looked at his younger brother in surprise. You want to move back, then, the siblings and children. Mu Bowen smiled lightly and said, of course they are back, and they will make their own decisions when they have their own careers. Mu Yangling was silent for a moment before asking, what about your ambition? For me, it's the same no matter where I am at this time. Mu Bowen patted his sister's hand comfortingly, and said, the reason why I was in a hurry to resign and go south was because the Ministry of Industry had a lot of information. For my reference, I still have to investigate around, but I have read all the documents and materials that the Ministry of Industry has been able to read for more than 10 years, and it doesn't matter whether I stay in the capital or move back to the north. In the past, Mu Bowen had no achievements in water control, and he was nothing if he resigned from office, but now he is a well-known Mr. Mu from the Ministry of Industry. He for details. Even so, it's better to move back to the Northland, where I can serve my parents and continue my ambitions. Mu Bowen didn't have too much ambition. After the snow disaster passed, he would start writing a book, and organize the water control gains from these years into a book. He could just help the local area build some water conservancy occasionally. But no matter whether it is writing books or building water conservancy, he still has decades of remaining life to complete, but his parents are already old, and he does not want to have the shortcoming of children want to support but not relatives. When he comes back this time, Mu Bowen found that his parents were old, even older than he thought. Sister, the capital city is too far away from Baidi, and my mother always reports good news but not bad news. I'm afraid that one day something will happen to me and I will be too late. They have 2 sons. If neither son is with them, how uncomfortable they will be. I am the eldest son, and I should have taken care of this family. Seeing his serious look, Mu Yangling smiled immediately, and patted him on the shoulder in relief. Sister supports you. If father and mother are really going to be sick, please tell me, and your brother-in-law and I will come to serve parents. Mu Bowen smiled, okay. After a while, he said to her seriously, thank you, sister. Growing up, it seemed like she would support him no matter what he said he would do. Mu Yangling pursed his lips and patted his head. Mu Bowen didn't avoid this action. The siblings talked for a while before leaving. Chi Heiran got out of nowhere, and said to her, I don't blame the little bears for being jealous of Bowen, you are too kind to him. I don't know, some people thought he was also the son of the master. Mu Yangling couldn't help choking, put down his teacup and kicked him. What nonsense are you talking about? Do you have the ability to give birth to such a big son? Chi Heiran snorted twice, and sat down next to his wife. It's fine if he comes back. Didn't you worry about your father-in-law and mother-in-law before? You can rest assured that he is by your side. He said again, fortunately, I have many sons. From now on, it will be enough for the 4 of them to take turns for 3 months. Mu Yangling's head was full of black lines. Didn't you say that you won't spend time with children when you get old? Chi Heiran said dejectedly, Master, I won't live with them. We will build a warm soup mansion in the western suburbs. It will be warm in winter and cool in summer. Let the 4 of them take turns to serve us, lest outsiders say they are unfilial. Mu Yangling twitched the corner of his mouth. Mu Bowen didn't tell his parents that he was going to move back. At this time, the snow disaster had not yet passed, and the Fang family had to go north after the snow had melted in spring. At this time, it was just to make their parents look forward to it. Mu Yangling thought that his younger brother wanted to give his parents a surprise, so he didn't point it out, so Mu Shi and Shu Wanyang didn't know what their children's plans were. Jia also has a family to take care of, so they can't stay long. Instead, Mu Yangling and Chi Heiran stayed. The couple decided to wait for the weather to warm up before leaving, so as to accompany their parents. When Mu Kijia saw her sister who was free to come and go, with a relaxed expression, she couldn't help enviously saying, "My sister's life is really envied even by gods. Maybe it's because of a good life and a cheerful mood." Her sister, who is nearly 10 years older than her, looks just like her, even her face is tenderer than hers. When the two of them go out, outsiders will definitely not be able to tell who they are is the older sister, who is the younger sister. Xu Wanyang smiled and said, "That was the life before you saw your sister. I, a bystander, would be terrified when I saw it." She reached out to touch the eldest daughter's hair, and said with a smile, "You are free or not? It doesn't matter, as long as it's safe and sound." Mu Yangling grinned, "Don't worry, mother, your daughter will live a long and safe life." Mu Kijia was complicated for a while, and Mu Bowen was sensitive. When he saw her, he got up and sent her out. He changed the subject and said, "How is brother-in-law treating you?" Mu Kijia nodded, "Okay. But no matter how good it is, it can't be as good as 1/3 of the brother-in-law's relationship with the sister. When the family eats, the brother-in-law will always pay attention to the sister." Bowl of soup. That night she wanted to talk to her sister privately, but she saw her brother-in-law brought hot water to soak her feet, and the most honorable man besides the emperor and the emperor just squatted on the ground and rubbed her feet, disgusting her while washing. My sister giggled and coaxed him with soft words. Of course her husband is good to her, he is the husband she chose, but he has never paid attention to these things, and at this time she does not know how much she occupies her husband's heart. She knows that she shouldn't compete with her sister, but sometimes she just can't help thinking, if a brother-in-law can do that for her sister, why would her husband do that? No way. The younger brother and younger sister were brought up by Mu Bowen. Although we had less contact with each other these years, he could tell what his younger sister was thinking at a glance. He held back for a long time, until his sister got into the carriage. He persuaded with a red face, "It's good, there are thousands of people, I also love and respect your sister-in-law, but I can't lose my family and career like my brother-in-law. I took my wife to play everywhere, but it's not that I treat your sister-in-law badly, but, it's..." Seeing her brother's distressed look, Mu Kijia burst out laughing with a puchi. Her brows and eyes relaxed a little, and she said, "I know, big brother, I won't go into a dead end." After finishing speaking, he winked at his elder brother and said, "I know you love sister-in-law, so you don't need to emphasize it with your sister." Mu Bowen's face turned even redder. At this moment, he felt the hardships of being the eldest son and elder brother. He not only had to take good care of his parents, but also had to deal with the relationship between brothers and sisters. He felt very tired. Mu Kijia waved to his elder brother and left. Mu Bowen also rushed to leave the next day, because he had a plan to move back home, so he paid more attention to the project. In 2 months, he basically walked the Northland once, and when he rushed back to Xingzhou Mansion, half of the first month of the new year is over with my parents. Seeing his unshaven son who was as thin as a pole, Mu Shi couldn't say anything to blame. Xu Wanyang held her son's hands and her eyes were red, and while pulling him home, she blamed, "You don't love me too much. Why are you so skinny after stressing yourself? How can we rest assured to let you go out like this?" Mu Bowen said in a low voice, "If my son doesn't go out, I will stay at home with you from now on. Unless the Ministry of Industry specially hires me again, I won't be able to go far." Xu Wanyang was taken aback, looked at her son in a daze and asked, "What did you say?" Mu Shi also looked at his son dumbfounded. Mu Bowen said with a smile, "My son said he can't leave. I have written a book for Mrs. Fang, and asked her to come back with the children after the spring. We will come back to live with my parents. I hope my mother will not dislike her son. Xu Huanyang looked at her husband with a stern face, but his eyes were turning from side to side, tears came down in a flash, and she said happily, "You are my son, how could I despise you?" The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1369. The little Qi Ziyuan held the medicine bowl with both hands and carefully brought it to his mother's bedside, and said crisply, "Mother, it's time for you to drink the medicine." Zhu Wan raised her head and couldn't help smiling when she saw her son's round face covered with sweat. She straightened up, took the bowl and drank it down, and said to her son with a smile, "Okay, mother has taken the medicine, Xiu Yuan will take care of him, brother." Qi Ziyuan became happy, and asked, "Mother, the younger brother looks better the longer he grows, he can have a name now, please give him a name." Zhu Wan hesitated, "Your father must choose the name." Qi Ziyuan was a little displeased. Although he was young, he could already tell the difference between closeness and closeness. He didn't like his father very much, but he rarely contradicted his mother, so he could only look at his mother expectantly with his round eyes open. What Zhu Wan couldn't bear the most was her son's gaze. Thinking that her husband was now focusing on Wu's body and mind, she might not feel sorry for their youngest son. She even took the name of the eldest son, and he would not care about the name of the younger son, so Zhu Wanlu pondered for a long time and took out the name he had been thinking about for a long time, then call it Heiran, taken from Mencius. Gongsun Zhouan, I am good at cultivating my awe-inspiring aura, it is a kind of aura. It is the largest and strongest. If it is raised directly and harmless, it is stuffed between the heaven and the earth. Zhu Wan looked at the eldest son with a smile, "What do you think?" Qi Ziyuan was star-eyed, he was still young, he didn't understand much, but he felt very powerful. He repeated the name several times, and nodded viciously after memorizing it. He said happily, "I'll go and tell my brother that he has a name." Zhu Wan watched him run away with a smile. No one thought that this would be the last time they saw each other. It's been a while since the little brother was born, a white and tender ball. Qi Ziyuan loves it very much. Lying on the side, just holding his little hand can play for a whole day. It wasn't until the child was hungry and needed milk that Qi Ziyuan regretfully left his brother and jumped out. He looked at the time and found that it was lunch break time. He rolled his eyes and planned to go to his mother for a lunch break. The mistress of the Qi family had just given birth, and everyone knew that the master didn't like the mistress and her child, so Qi Ziyuan was very negligent, and acted as if he didn't see it. Qi Ziyuan didn't mind either, and ran to his mother's yard bouncing around, only to find that the yard was so quiet that even the woman guarding the gate was gone. He couldn't help frowning, slowed down and went to find his mother full of doubts. There was a voice in the room, and it was Wu Shi's voice that he hated the most. Qi Ziyuan couldn't help but stop, and then slowly moved towards the house. He leaned on the window and looked in, and saw that Wu was talking to his mother with his head down. His voice was soft and timid, but the content made him feel chilly. "Don't worry, sister, after becoming a flat wife, my sister will definitely respect and love her and serve her husband well and the children's." Zhu Wan looked at Qi Feng, who was standing aside with a pale face, and asked, "What do you say?" Qi Feng frowned, his expression was very displeased, and he said, "What else can I say? This is what my mother meant. My mother is sick in bed and needs to celebrate, and you can't serve around, so let Roer serve her. Illness, she is now a great hero, and she deserves the position of equal wife." There was despair in Zhu Wan's eyes, and endless hatred burst out in an instant. She glared at Qi Feng, but saw the small figure lying on the window behind him. "Let my son see such a dirty scene." A sense of crisis rose in Zhu Wan's heart. She felt that she would not live long. At this time, her son must not conflict with Qi Feng, so she looked past Qi Feng with sadness and pleading towards the little boy by the window. Figure. Qi Feng thought she was looking at him. Seeing her so sad, he couldn't help sighing, and slowed down his voice. It's just a flat wife, you are still the mistress of my Chi family, this hasn't changed, why should you be like this, narrow-minded? Wu Shi also hurriedly stated that she would not compete with Zhu Wan for the position of mistress. Zhu Wan didn't respond to them, but withdrew her pleading eyes, pointed at the door and said lightly, "Get out." Qi Feng was furious, as if he had been greatly insulted. He turned around and walked out. Mrs. Wu hurried to catch up, but at this time the little figure lying on the window had slipped behind the flowers in the yard. He covered his mouth with his hands to keep himself from crying, and ran into the house after his father and Mrs. Wu left. Zhu Wan noticed the wetness under her body, and thought that after drinking the bowl of medicine at noon, she would feel drowsy, and none of the maids and women serving her were gone, so she didn't understand that she had lost her mind. But the medicine was boiled by her son himself, and it was brought by him himself. Zhu Wan gritted her teeth so as not to show any strange color. She knew that she would not live long, so she reached out to touch her son's face and said, "Ziyuan, my son, mother is going to die, you have to take good care of your younger brother, you understand?" Qi Ziyuan opened his mouth wide, tears fell down, he wanted to cry, but his mother grabbed him. Zhu Wan grabbed the child's arm, covered his mouth, and said earnestly, "Don't tell others what you saw today, mother was pissed off by Qi Feng and Mrs. Wu, and it's not good for you if you tell it. Keep it a secret, and when you grow up, kill Wu to avenge your mother. Remember, your ultimate goal is to take care of yourself and your younger brother. If killing Wu can't make you feel better, then don't kill her. If my brother is doing well, my mother will be happy." Qi Ziyuan looked at his mother with tears in his eyes, but Zhu Wan's spirit was unprecedentedly good, and told them one by one, "The people around my mother can't be trusted, don't trust them, go to your Aunt Xia, let her take care of you, wait for the two of you when an uncle comes, you and your younger brother will go with them, and come back when you grow up." Zhu Wan repeatedly urged, "Son, mother loves you and brother, so you must have a good life. Remember, mother can feel at ease as long as you live well. Revenge is not a big deal. Revenge has wronged me, so my mother will not die with peace in my eyes, and when my son is successful, I will avenge my mother when I crush Wu Shi to death like crushing an ant, okay, okay." The little Qi Ziyuan nodded fiercely, at this time he also smelled a strong smell of blood. Zhu Wan's breathing became heavier, and she murmured, "I was pissed off by Qi Feng and Wu, tell your uncles, you must take good care of you, don't leave you in the Qi family, don't stay in the Qi family. He must not let his son know that she died because of that bowl of medicine, otherwise he will have no peace for the rest of his life. The Qi family is a dragon's pond and a tiger's den, staying here is tantamount to courting death." Zhu Wan closed her eyes in all kinds of worries. Qi Ziyuan lay on the bed and cried loudly. At this time the servants in the yard came back gradually, and came in quickly when they heard that the crying sound was wrong. Seeing Zhu Wan lying on the bed with a face like gold paper, feeling in his heart terrified, she stepped forward to lift the quilt and found that the quilt on the bed was completely soaked in blood. The girl screamed and ran out and shouted, "Madam is bleeding profusely, Madam is bleeding profusely." Qi Ziyuan looked at the blood under his mother with hatred, clenched his fists and bit his lips. Zhu Wan overestimated Qi Ziyuan's obedience. He didn't want to leave Qi's family, he wanted to watch his enemy day and night, so that he could feel at ease. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 1370. Zhu Wan died suddenly, and when Xia Tong came over, she had already been buried, because the Qi family reported that she died of postpartum hemorrhage, and it was indeed difficult for Zhu Wan to give birth to her second son, and it was also dangerous at that time, and there was a risk of hemorrhage, so she did not no doubt. Seeing Qi Ziyuan kneeling in front of the coffin in filial piety, she couldn't help but feel a pain when she thought of her baby nephew who was still in her infancy. "Aunt is here." Qi Ziyuan bit his lip, and said word by word in his aunt's ear, "Auntie, my mother was killed by my father and Mrs. Wu, I saw it with my own eyes, I saw them pissed off my mother to death in my mother's room." Shocked, Xiaotong couldn't help hugging Qi Ziyuan tightly, and looked up at the door, only to find that the people who came and went to express their condolences were all members of the Qi clan, and there were a few servants guarding the door. At this time Xiaotong made the most correct decision in her life. She endured it, hugged Qi Ziyuan and whispered in his ear, "Good boy, don't be afraid, don't say anything about this, let us adults do it." Qi Ziyuan is too young, not to mention that his testimony will not be accepted, even if everyone believes it, he will be charged with suing his father for being unfilial throughout his life, and his younger brother is too young, so young that he could die at any time. Xiaotong knew her cousin well, and between her child and her, she would definitely choose to keep the child safe. She didn't want her to die in peace. She patted Qi Ziyuan on the back, stood up and looked at the mourning hall arranged by Qi Mansion, knelt on the futon and looked at the coffin, clenched her hands into fists, and asked in her heart, "Awan, we will avenge you." The members of the Qi family didn't notice any abnormalities. After all, everyone knew that Xiaotong and sister Zuwan were deeply in love. The two of them were as good as one person. It was normal for them to hug their nephew in front of the mourning hall. Xiaotong got up, and said to the servant of Kifu, "I'm going to see my little nephew, let Ziyuan go with me, I have something to tell him." Qi Feng happened to enter the door, glanced at the eldest son kneeling on the ground with his head bowed, and sighed, "All right, Ziyuan has not run out of water for a day, please ask Mrs. Fan to persuade him not to burn himself out." Although Xiaotong decided not to make a fuss for the time being, Qi Feng didn't look good either, so she just snorted coldly and pulled Qi Ziyuan up and walked out. Qi Feng frowned, but he knew that this aunt had a violent temper, so he just felt a little displeased. Xiaotong dragged Qi Ziyuan to the baby's room, drove everyone out, and left only his own people to guard the door, and did not allow anyone to leave the hospital door, so he pulled Qi Ziyuan over to ask for details. Qi Ziyuan held back for a whole day, full of fear and hatred, and couldn't bear it anymore, hugged Xiaotong and burst into tears, out of breath, telling what he saw that day. Qi Ziyuan, who was on the side, heard his brother crying, and he also burst into tears, and Qi Ziyuan turned around to coax his brother. Xiaotong was furious. She didn't expect that the Qi family would dare to treat Zuwan like this. She walked around the room twice and said angrily, "Is this when I wish the family is empty? I'll write to you right now, uncle, we will not let this matter go well. Yuan, where are the people serving in your mother's house?" Qi Ziyuan's face turned red, and he said, "They're all gone. My father said they didn't do enough to take care of my mother, so they sold them all." Xiaotong's chest rose and fell sharply, and he gritted his teeth and said, "Good luck, Qi Feng." She turned around and took down Qi Ziyuan's small whip on the wall, and was about to go out with anger in her eyes, but when she saw the baby lying on the bed, and the child in filial piety lying on the bedside to comfort the baby, Xiaotong stepped forward no matter what. Not going out. She could make a big fuss, even sue Qi Feng to the yamen, and then what? Even if they could prove that Qi Feng and Wu Shi went in and out of Zuwan's room during that time, and the servants were not there at that time, what direct evidence would prove that Zuwan was killed by them? Ziyuan said that Zuwan had shed a lot of blood, which shows that she really bled to death after being angry, and they had no direct evidence at all. As for Ziyuan and his younger brother, both belong to the blood of the Qi family, it is impossible for them to leave the family. If they pinch these two children, it is equivalent to pinching the lifeblood of the Zhu family and the Xia family. Xiaotong was so angry that he swung his whip twice, turned around and hugged Qi Ziyuan and said, "Son, we can't make a fuss about this, at least not now, we need to have more evidence, we will look for them when you grow up, settle accounts." Qi Ziyuan looked at his aunt in confusion, wondering why she didn't seek justice for his mother. Qi Ziyuan could only place his hopes on his two uncles. Now his heart was on fire, and he wished he could rush over and kill Mrs. Wu. However, the two uncles of Zhu's family couldn't come back in time, because there was a war at the border, and when they came back from leave, Zhu Wan had already been buried. Qi Ziyuan has grown into a prickly hedgehog, while Qi Heiran has been taken to Fan's house to be raised. From this point of view, the two children were bullied in the Qi family. The two uncles of the Zhu family were furious and couldn't help beating up Qi Feng. They didn't know the cause of their sister's death at that time, but they just thought Qi Feng didn't take good care of the two nephews, so they beat him up. His subordinates were merciful. I still regard him as my brother-in-law in my heart. But Qi Feng obviously couldn't accept the way the two brothers-in-law got close. He did something that angered Zhu's family and prevented him from making any progress in his official career. Qi Feng became angry and wanted to make Mrs. Wu his wife, but Qi's mother hesitated and said, Ms. Zhu died less than 2 months ago. It's not good for you to help her as his wife now. Why don't you wait a year for her filial piety? Qi Feng said angrily, didn't mother see the wound on my face? The Zhu family is deceiving people too much, thinking that they can do whatever they want with a little favor to my Qi family. I'm not used to their temper. Qi's mother looked at the bruises on her son's face, and felt a little dissatisfied with Zhu's family, so she didn't object anymore. Only then did Qi Feng shake off his sleeves, and as soon as he went out, he saw the eldest son standing not far away, and immediately said angrily, what are you doing here? You can use outsiders to deal with your father if you can. The government will bring your brother back, otherwise you will not come back either. Qi Ziyuan sneered at his father, turned around and left. Qi Feng fell back angrily. The younger brother was young, and they would kill others if he couldn't even turn over. If he hadn't suddenly gone to find his younger brother during lunch break, how could he have found him put on the ground? It was still the beginning of summer, and the weather was still a bit cold, let alone on the floor. He couldn't imagine that if he found out a few days later, would his younger brother be caught in the cold, and then gradually weaken and die, and he would not even be able to enter the ancestral grave. Fortunately, the wet nurse was stupid enough to not only put the younger brother on the ground, but also pinched a lot of marks on the younger brother, so he could cooperate with his aunt and use these as evidence to bring the younger brother to Fan's residence to be raised. As long as the younger brother can live, he is here to watch, to see what will happen to them. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1371. Qi Ziyuan was full of hatred, so he didn't leave Qi's house without saying anything. He always had a doubt in his heart. If he didn't lie on the window at that time, but ran into the house directly, then Wu and his father wouldn't say those things that hurt my mother, maybe my mother won't bleed to death in anger. And because of his mother's death, his younger brother was charged with Kemu. Little Qi Ziyuan felt ashamed of his mother and younger brother, and this way of suffering himself and watching his enemy suffer made him feel a lot better. Although Qi Feng doesn't like Qi Ziyuan, he is his blood after all, so he doesn't hold back what he should have. Therefore, although Qi Ziyuan hates him, a balance has been maintained between the two sides. But this balance was quickly broken, because the two uncles of the Zhu family soon learned the so-called truth about the death of their sister from Xiaotong. In addition, Qi Feng is actively trying to correct the Wu family, which completely angered the two uncles of the Zhu family. Before, they just beat Qi Feng, but this time they directly hit the Qi family and asked the Qi family to give an explanation. The writing of the concubine's room requires a letter of consent from the wife's natal family, so it's not something Qi Feng can do if he wants to. In addition, the two uncles of the Zhu family also found the girls who were sold out. They all served in Zhu Wan's yard. Although they could not directly prove that Qi Feng killed his wife, they also let the Qi family know that Qi Feng suspected of murdering his wife. In private negotiations, some plausible evidence is sometimes enough. With these things, the Zhu family suppressed the Qi family to provide guarantee for the Qi Zhaoyuan brothers, and wanted to let their brothers grow up safely, otherwise the Zhu family would lie forever with the Qi family. At that time, Qi Feng was the only official in the Qi family, and he was a civil servant. He was not very powerful, and he was not on the same level as the Zhu family, so he agreed to the conditions very aggrieved. The elders of the family are pressing each other. Zhu Qing knew that unless they found conclusive evidence, they would have nothing to do with Qi Feng. But they also had other ways to vent their anger. Originally, they still cared about their two nephews and planned to turn a blind eye to wait for them to grow up, but Qi Zhaoyuan came to the door in person, with a smile on his little face. "It is perseverance, uncle. If you want to deal with my father, go ahead, don't worry about me and my brother. My brother has been sent to Aunt Xia's upbringing, he will be safe and sound, but with two uncles here, he doesn't dare to do anything to me kind of." Zhu Qing saw that his nephew's expression was wrong, and after coaxing him away, he said to his younger brother Zhu Feng, "Xiu Yuan's situation is not right, he is afraid that he will blame Wan'er's death on himself." Zhu Feng was so angry that he slapped the table. "Damn Qi Feng, I wish I could kill him. You have to let the child out of his heart, otherwise I'm afraid it will grow crooked," Zhu Qing said in a deep voice. "Then what do you say?" Zhu Feng was so angry that his eyes were red. Zhu Qing murmured, "Maybe he will feel better if he lives a little bit harder." Zhu Feng opened his mouth wide and said disapprovingly, "Brother, Wan'er should be sad if she knows." But Zhu Qing said stubbornly, "Although Zhaoyuan is still young, he has big ideas in his heart. It is useless for us to just persuade him blindly. We have to let someone draw out the hostility in his heart. Then we will lure him out again on the right track. If you blindly comfort him and let him suppress the hatred in his heart, over time, even if he is not a pervert, he will become a pervert." Zhu Qing doesn't want to see such a thing happen. He made up his mind, and the next day he brought his younger brother back to Qi's house to ask for Zhu Wan's dowry, and to keep the two children. The property that the Qi clan brought with them when they fled south was not much, not as much as their sister's dowry, so it was a lot of money for Qi Feng. But he is a gentleman, two uncles have come to the door, he naturally can't keep the money, so he can only take things away with them. Zhu's family invited Yamen to do notarization, saying that they would return the things to the two children after they got married. Now that the face has been torn apart, the Zhu family will naturally not leave any room for Qi Feng, and in front of the officials who came to do the notarization, they gave Qi Zhaoyuan the servants of the two households. Hands. Zhu Qing said without hesitation, "The Wu family can't even tolerate a newborn baby, let alone Zhaoyuan, so they mainly protect my nephew." He sneered at Qi Feng, "I know you are an ungrateful person, but the tiger's poison does not eat offspring, I just hope you can take care of the relationship between father and son." Qi Feng's face was as black as a pot at that time. He had never been so humiliated in front of his colleagues. But this is not enough. Although the Zhu family is a general, but because of his open personality and bold behavior, he has a lot of contacts in the officialdom. After they worked, many censors began to impeach Qi Feng. He was expected to be promoted that year. But his scandals continued, the official assessment back then was only inferior, and the matter of promotion fell through immediately. Instead, one of his enemies climbed above him. Zhu Qing sent someone to send a letter to him, clearly saying, "This is just the beginning. If you treat my nephew well, this is a lesson. If not, even if there is a difference between civil and military, my Zhu family's connections want to pull you down, but I can't, not difficult." Qi Feng knows that someone has been staring at him in the dark, and this feeling is stuck in his throat, which is why he has always been clean and honest, and he will not accept anything that should not be accepted by him. It is not because he is not moved, but because he dare not. He was afraid that if he collected things with his front feet, Zhujiao would make him fall into the abyss with his back feet, and because of this, Qi Feng turned his anger on Qi Ziyuan and treated him very badly. Not only did he lack food and clothing, but he also drove away the enlightenment Mr. Zhu Wanggong hired him, and he was not allowed to go to school again. He knew that Qi Ziyuan could not die, otherwise the Zhu family would not let him go, but he had many ways to take revenge on the Zhu family. For example, raising Qi Ziyuan into a stupid dandy. He thought it was torture for Qi Ziyuan, but it was the salvation of Qi Ziyuan's soul, and it also strengthened his hatred for his father. And Zhu Qing gave Qi Ziyuan's servants carefully selected, not only can teach him to read in private, but also teach him the principles of life. After 3 years, the hostility in Qi Ziyuan's heart gradually disappeared, and he began to think about his mother's expectations for him. The mother said, as long as he and his brother live well. But judging from the current situation, he and his younger brother are really not living well, so he has to work hard. Qi Ziyuan thought about his future. His father was a civil servant, and it would take him 20 or 30 years to study the imperial examinations, become an official, and surpass his father. Civilian promotion is stable, but it takes too long. The impatient little Qi Ziyuan immediately denies this path, so he can only take the martial path. Now the world is in chaos, and there are wars almost every day. It would be great for him to serve as a soldier, and he has 2 uncles in the army. Qi Ziyuan made up his mind, and told Xia Tong when he went to Fan Mansion to visit his younger brother again, hoping that she could contact the 2 uncles to invite him a martial arts master. Seeing that the child had finally figured it out, Xia Tong couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief, and nodded with a smile on his face. Don't worry, my aunt will write to your uncles soon. Yun, can you let go of your mother's death? My aunt is very happy. You have to know that you and your brother are the most important things to your mother. Qi Ziyuan lowered his eyes, nodded and said, don't worry, auntie, I know how to do it. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1372. 8-year-old Qi Ziyuan has grown up, he clearly knows how to protect himself and torture his enemies. Xia Tong couldn't help sighing when he saw it, patted the child's head and let him go out. There were 2 chubby children squatting in the small yard. Qi Ziyuan couldn't help but look soft and approach them with a smile on his face when he saw them. Little Qi Heiran was counting ants with his big eyes, and found that one crawled out of his sight. He hurriedly lowered his head to chase after it, but because he was wearing too much clothes, he couldn't squat. All of a sudden, his head fell forward, and his whole body after somersaulting, he crushed the little boy on the opposite side in one fell swoop. Fan Zijian, who was being suppressed, screamed angrily, but Qi Heiran was still a little confused, turning his head and not responding. Qi Ziyuan couldn't help laughing, stepped forward to pick up his younger brother, then helped his cousin up, and asked with a smile, does it hurt from the fall? Fan Zijian was so angry that he pointed at Qi Heiran's nose and cursed, you are so stupid. Qi Heiran didn't mind at all. When he saw his brother, he hugged his thigh happily and looked at him with bright eyes. Brother, are you here to take us to play? Qi Ziyuan touched his head and asked, where do you want to go? Qi Heiran tilted his head and thought for a while, then said, go ride a horse, ride a big horse. Fan Zixiao said that his uncle took him to ride a horse, Zijian, and I haven't ridden yet. Qi Ziyuan was instantly displeased. He knew that his uncle was eccentric, and that his aunt's life in the Fan family was not as easy as she showed, but he didn't expect his uncle to be so eccentric. Fan Zijian, who was a legitimate son, didn't go riding a horse, but brought a bastard son. He thought for a while and said, wait a little longer, brother will take you to ride horses. The 2 children cheered immediately, throwing away the unhappiness just now. Chi Xiaoyuan returned to Qi Mansion and was about to return to his own yard. When he passed by the garden, he heard Qi Shaosheng talking to his little friends, "My younger brother Kemu Kefu, that's why he was sent to his aunt's house to be raised. His mother is his mother hummed to death by K, only our family knows about this matter, you can't go out and talk about it." The other children nodded repeatedly, expressing that they would never tell the secret to others. Qi Xiaoyuan's face was livid, he looked left and right, and saw that the servants following them were standing far away, and not far away was the lotus pond. With anger in his heart, he rushed over and kicked Qi Shaosheng down in the chest with one kick, then stepped forward and grabbed his hair and dragged him into the lotus pond. His face was full of hostility, and he popped up suddenly again. The children were terrified and screamed, and the servants not far away were also shocked. When they realized it, Qi Xiaoyuan had already dragged Qi Shaosheng away. At the edge of the lotus pond, he grabbed his head and pressed it into the water, then pulled it up, looked him in the eyes and said word by word, "My mother was not killed by my younger brother, but by your aunt, damn, you remember." After that, he pushed his head into the water again. The servants rushed up to tear the two apart, but Qi Xiaoyuan's strength was unprecedented, and he pressed Qi Shaosheng down firmly. Under multiple effects, Qi Shaosheng's mouth and nose were stuck in the mud. When he finally separated the two of them and dragged Qi Shaosheng up, his face was already livid. The boys were horrified, and quickly removed the stolen goods from his mouth and nose, and then rushed to rescue him. They knew that if the second young master died, they would have no way of living. But Qi Xiaoyuan, who was thrown aside, laughed loudly and smiled at the stunned child. "It's a pity that the son of the enemy was not killed, so you don't want to associate with him anymore, otherwise." Qi Xiaoyuan smiled at them, and the children were so frightened that they immediately grabbed the hands of their servants and ran out. Only then did Qi Xiaoyuan get up satisfied. He looked down at his second younger brother who was coughing up water, and said with a sneer, "If I hear you slandering my mother and younger brother again, next time it will be as simple as pouring water." All the servants of the Qi family present shuddered. Everyone knew that the young master was a lunatic. If the kitchen deprives him of his food, he can smash the whole kitchen. If the sewing room deprives him of his clothes, he can burn everything in the sewing room. If you come up, you can stop the second young master and the third young master from beating them to death. Once, the master was angry and locked him up for a month. An MRS fan called the door. The next day, there were multiple bullets impeaching the master for not being strict with the family, allowing the concubine and concubine to murder the son-in-law, and finally released him. The wife threw Aunt Wu down in the room, grabbed the teapot and smashed it to death. No matter how many people came forward to talk, it was useless. Aunt Wu had a 3-month miscarriage that time, and the old lady was sick because of it. But no matter how the old master scolded him, he would be unscrupulous if rumors about how unfilial he was in the house, and according to the people in the old lady's room at the time, the young master laughed happily when he saw Aunt Wu was covered in blood. The old lady and Aunt Wu said, "This is retribution, this is retribution. My mother looked like this when she was so angry that she bled profusely. MRS Wu, will you die this time? Will you die?" Wu's was just a miscarriage, so of course she wouldn't die. But the strange thing is that the master and Aunt Wu didn't go to punish the young master, but let them go. It's just that Qi Xiaoyuan was isolated by the Qi family. Except for his wet nurse and the 2 servants sent by the Zhu family, no one in the whole Qi family cared about him. In the past year, apart from bullying the second and third young masters from time to time, the young master has rarely had any conflicts with Aunt Wu. They almost forgot how terrible the young master is, but they didn't expect the young master to have an attack again this time. The servants were scared to death, but Qi Xiaoyuan happily went back to the house. Seeing that his hand was hurt, his nurse hurriedly took some ointment and wiped it on him with a worried face, and persuaded him, "Young master, you are getting older every day, so you still have to worry about your reputation. Go out, and the outside world will say that you are not filial or fraternal. Chi Xiuyuan said, I'm not filial or fraternal, and I don't take the imperial examination. It's useless to have such a reputation. The nurse could only sigh and said worriedly, I don't know how the master will punish you. Chi Xiuyuan sneered, he won't punish me, he was afraid of seeing me this year, how could he punish me? Ever since he revealed what happened 3 years ago in the old lady's house a year ago, Qi Feng and Wu Shi didn't punish him as if they were guilty, and of course they ignored him again, and let the servants in the mansion completely isolate him. It was also that Wu's miscarriage that made Qi Xiuyuan's hatred dissipate a bit, otherwise he would not have been so quiet this year. Qi Feng did not come to Qi Xiuyuan, he made compensation to Wu, he promised to record Wu in the genealogy, in the name of Ping wife. Qi Feng had long thought that his mother was happy to promote the Wu family as an equal wife, but the Qi family was afraid of offending the Zhu family, so they did not write down the genealogy, and this time he planned to use this incident to compare with Qi Xiuyuan who harmed Wu a year ago. Zhu's miscarriage forced Zhu's family to make concessions.